Just a quick note on the gospel that this is the continuation of yesterday's gospel, where we heard about how Jesus told the lame man, "Rise, pick up your mat and walk." And then they found out, well, this was a Sabbath, and so they're persecuting Jesus because of that. And so we'll hear about this into tomorrow as well. The first reading today made me start to think about just a little bit of the history of Israel. In this time, Isaiah is speaking to the people of Judea who had been deported, exiled from their land. They're now in Babylon. Now, about 150, 200 years, I forget the exact dates. Forgive me, you who are history majors. Before their deportation, there was the Assyrian exile, where the northern parts of Israel, the Galilee region, they were all taken away and never returned. Never returned. These people who are now in Babylon from the southern tribes, the tribe of Judea and Benjamin, they have somehow been able to keep their identity, but they feel lost. 70 years they've been in this trial. They've been in this exile. Think about it. Looking back on history, 70 years is nothing, but in a person's life, that's most of it. That's most of their life. The people that were deported, most of them did not ever get back to see Jerusalem again. This was their life, and they may have expected just to be in this darkness, that they would no longer be a people, ever again. But through the prophet Isaiah, God says, "In the time of favor I have answered you. In the day of salvation I have helped you. I've kept you and given you a covenant to the people." And he continues, "I've restored the land. I'm doing all these things." And at the end of it, but Zion says, there is no Zion anymore. But the people of Judea, who are now in exile, they say, "The Lord has forsaken me. My Lord has forgotten me." And in the darkness, we can feel that way, can't we? We feel like the Lord has forgotten us. He's forsaken us. But God says, "Can a mother forget her infant, be without tenderness for the child of her womb? Even should she forget, I will never forget you." God is faithful. I'm going to have a really long homily today, sorry. Today in the Magnificat, we hear from the servant of God, Walter Kisek, who was a Jesuit. He wrote He Leadeth Me, which is an incredibly powerful book, suggested for everyone. He's an American Jesuit who went over to Poland to minister to the people there. He actually had hoped to go into Russia, but Russia had closed its borders. And so he went into Poland, and he was ministering there. And this takes, the part of this book, which I'm going to read today, takes place just after Russia has now invaded Poland. "They've taken the town. The Soviets are here." The news spread like panic through the small village of Alberton, Poland, on October 17th, 1939. I had just finished Mass and breakfast on that memorable morning when bewildered parishioners came to tell me the news. It was news we had feared, but now our fears were realized. Suddenly our whole world, theirs and mine, had changed. It is impossible to describe the feeling that comes over you at such a time. The feeling that somehow, in an instant of time, everything has changed, and nothing again will ever be quite the same. And again, I'm thinking about the people of Israel as they were deported, and they're saying, will we ever have a people again? And our own lives, when things go wrong, and we say, where is God now? Will anything ever be the same? So continuing, that tomorrow will never again be like yesterday. That the very trees, the grass, the air, the daylight are no longer the same, for the world has changed. It is a feeling impossible to describe, yet one that every wife who has lost a husband knows. Again and again I had to force myself not to think of the question that kept returning unbidden to my mind. Why has God allowed this evil to happen? Surely He could defend and protect His flock instead of having it singled out for a special attack such as this. It was not a crisis of faith any more than it is for anyone who has ever suffered a great loss or faced a family tragedy and asked himself the same questions. It was rather a crisis of understanding, and no one need be ashamed to admit he has been troubled by it. Anyone who has done much reading in the Old Testament is familiar with those questions, most especially in the days after David, in the ages of captivity, when the glories of the golden age of Solomon were but a memory, by the rivers of Babylon and Israel had been broken and led away in shame. To Israel, surely it must have seemed the end of the world, the end of the covenant, the end of God's special care for His chosen people. Yet from our vantage point in history, we know it was really quite the opposite. Israel's troubles were in truth a manifestation of the Lord's special providence, His special love for His chosen people. Stop right there. What? Being deported was a special love for His chosen people? This takes prayer to understand. Like a fond and loving father, He was trying to wean them away from trust in kings or princes or in armies or the powers of this world. He was trying to teach them again and again that their faith must only be in Him alone. He was leading them through every trial and in every age to the realization that God alone is faithful in all tribulations, that He alone is constant in His love, and must be clung to even when it seems all else has been turned upside down. Their part in the covenant must be to trust in Him alone, to remain always faithful, to look to Him and not to other gods, to rely on Him and not other rulers or chariots or bowmen. He was ever faithful, and so in turn must they be, even when He led them where they would not go, into a land they knew not, or into exile. For He has chosen them, and they were His people. He would no more forget them than a mother could forget the child of her womb. So I think about war in Ukraine and questions of will this escalate, what's going to happen. When I think about the supply chain crises and inflation and everything happening in the world, when I think about the personal tribulations and trials that people have shared with me in their own lives and their families and the like, we can sometimes have that, maybe not a crisis of faith, but crisis of understanding. And yet, we can trust. Can a mother forget her infant, be without tenderness for the child of her womb? Even should she forget, I will never forget you.